Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Bitcoin Trade. If you haven't already heard or have heard that Canada has basically went out of their way to amend their current laws to include virtual currencies. And so in this episode, I'm going to go over some of the documents that cover that. I think it's going to affect um, a lot of people in Canada. And again, I also think it's not going to affect anything at all for a couple of reasons. So let's get started here. I don't speak French. I don't understand French. So if you, I don't know if any of you guys know anything about Canada. Um, I don't know much either. So I've done some research on Canada as far as their legal system, and I've come to the conclusion that people of Canada are basically servants or subjects of, and I see this word Her Majesty all over the place in this document, but I guess I have to say they are subjects and servants of Her Majesty. Canadians have no absolute rights. The only thing good about Canada or a Canadian being in Canada is that you have the right to leave Canada. So that's the only thing that I saw in the Canadian Constitution that has any meaningful, useful right whatsoever. But even then, all the rights that anybody have in Canada are not, and I repeat, are not absolute. You have no absolute. Canadians have no absolute rights. Even to vote, I would say, you know, is not absolute. Freedom of expression is not absolute. At any point in time, as the government of Canada wishes, they may revoke, abridge your rights. That's what I'm finding out anyway. So, for this to happen in a couple months, they create a law that includes digital currencies or dealing in digital currencies, or digital currencies to be money. So there's some implications here beyond what is, what most people think. So let's go over this real quick. So here it is. Here's the Economic Action Plan 2014. I've gotten down to, let me see here. This is page 16, and this is where it starts off. There's a lot of other junk in here, but I'm going to mainly go into, Bitcoin related stuff. So I'll save you all some time. So as we read here, it says reporting of electronic funds transfer. And they give you a lot of definitions and everything. But I'm going to scroll down to here, if you don't mind. Oops, excuse me. I'm going to scroll down. Okay, they talk about a lot of stuff, and I would highly recommend you read all that stuff. But most importantly, here it says money service business means an entity engaged in the business of foreign exchange dealing, of remitting funds or transmitting funds by any means or through an entity or electronic funds transfer network, or of issuing or redeeming money orders, traveler's checks, or other similar negotiable instruments except for checks payable to a named entity. Alright, so that's their current definition of money service business. Alright, so that's the issue at hand. That's what they wanted to change. They wanted to put people or companies that I guess act like Western Union, I guess would be an example, or acts like a bank where you would have your coins or transfer your funds and that account would be held by a different entity, not by you. So I guess that that's what they're trying to get at, and those entities would have to comply with FinTrack, I believe. I don't know the full name. I'm not going to bother, but it's basically the financial enforcement network in Canada, for the most part, and anybody who are members. So apparently, typically your banks would be members of this organization and everything. So anyways, that's the current definition, right? And then reporting entity. So there's reporting entity. So once you become a money business service, you've also become a reporting entity. All right. So and also there's a definition of entity here. So I'm going to see if I can find that for you. And basically, when they say entity, let me see if I can find it. Cash, casino, client, credit union, blah blah blah. Let's see if I can find the definition of entity. Okay, well, it doesn't. I'll find it later. But then it goes into, it talks about, the reporting aspects of what you have to do. Pretty much, you're going to be like a bank and have the obligations to basically snitch on your customers based on certain criterias. That's all this is. So let me pan down. Okay, let me pan down to the part where they talk about, and that would be under page 22, I believe. Okay, so we get into here. All right. So here's the part on page 22. Okay, page 22 on this what economic action plan on page 22. Let me see here. It says, there it is. Okay. So here's what they've done here. They've changed it. They said, aha, here's what we're going to change. And by the way, just to let you all know, this all comes into force by January 1st, 2015. So if you're doing something right now with Bitcoin and you're not really sure, stay calm. There's some. It sounds so familiar. There's some saying like, chill out and stay calm, like T-shirts and whatever. Well, anyways, stay calm. All right. You don't have to worry about this until basically next year, 2015. All right. So everyone, stay calm, relax. If you're doing something right now, go ahead and just keep on doing it, because it's not going to affect you until next year. But here it is. Here's the definition: money service business. All right. So now I can't find the definition of entity, but entity means any individual, any company, any partnership, any corporation, anybody, pretty much anybody, or any company or any business. So that's what an entity is. So that's their definition, by the way. So money service business means an entity that has a place of business in Canada and that is engaged in the business of providing at least one of the following services. So all this is the same as you saw from the old definition, except for this right here: dealing in virtual currencies as defined by regulation or a prescribed service, or okay. So these are two new things, and here's the problem. The problem is there is no regulation right now. There probably won't be any regulation coming out, or any idea of regulation coming out, until, well, it'll be enforced by January, but I believe the guidelines to this regulation will come out before then, probably real soon. But this is going to raise an interesting question. In my opinion, this is what the Canadians have done. Canadians have recognized Bitcoin as money. Okay? I mean, this is what I think inadvertently the government of Canada has done. They have inadvertently, alright, acknowledged virtual currencies as money. They're just, I mean, literally they're a step closer to acknowledging Bitcoin as actual currency. But okay, so they got it to the point where they acknowledge it's money, and they acknowledge that it's valuable enough to be money, to the point where it's almost like a currency. All right, it's almost like a currency now, but they're not saying it's a currency. All right, but if you got to be a money business service, what does that mean? I know at least it means it's money. So there you go. Now the other issue here is, it says here, as defined by regulation. As defined by regulation. So there is no regulation on virtual currencies. There is no regulation dealing in virtual currencies. All right. So Canadians, stay calm. All right, Canadians, stay calm. Here, I'll even do it on the French side here, for people who, I don't know, read French. I don't know what number that would be. I guess it's further down. But in this section right here, that's what it's talking about. And like I said, there is no regulation. They're actually, they're trying to make regulations. So from what I see right here, Canada, the government of Canada has acknowledged Bitcoin to be money. All right, that's what I see. Oops, give me a little piece of hair right there. And so that's what I see. But at the same time, they have not made any regulations regarding dealing in virtual currencies. None. So there is no regulation. There still is none. They're going to come up with one. And so here's the challenge, in my opinion, for the lawmakers in Canada. Define virtual currencies. Specifically define what a virtual currency is. Specifically define what dealing in virtual currency means. Because that's going to be tough. Because if any of you have been watching any of my videos, you'll realize that Bitcoin does not exist. Bitcoin is nothing. And it only becomes something when somebody, a person, an entity, takes nothing and turns it into something. So, I would say be careful. I've mentioned many times in my previous episodes when the U.S. government was figuring out how to make guidelines. And I'm going to have to tell you, I'm going to tell the Canadians the same thing I've told the Americans. You can inadvertently make regulations that will affect all other regulations regarding that matter. And next thing you know, you're going to have a legal conundrum on your hands. So be very careful when you put your definitions out there, because I'm already seeing loopholes, like crazy loopholes. And I'm already seeing, from what I've read, I can see how this can adversely affect the Canadian economy. All right, and I'm going to go into that a little bit later. But see, I just want to talk about that. And so that's where they talk about it. And then let me see where else. Uh, Let me see, and then okay, so they talk about that, and let me. Sorry if I scroll down too fast. Well, anyways, that's. Let me get down to the other section, if you don't mind. The rest of this is just junk, garbage to confuse the Canadian citizens of the laws, to obscure laws, in my opinion. Um, I have nothing against Canada. It's just that I'm an outsider looking in at you guys, and I have to admit, everybody in Canada or any Canadian citizen is basically a slave to the government. That's just my opinion. I mean, if anybody Canadians, take a look at your constitution. It's clearly stated in there that at any given point in time, from what I've read, the government can totally abridge your rights, your constitutional rights. They can deny your constitutional rights too. So, let me see here. What are they talking about? They talk about a lot of stuff. Like once you become a money business, they talk a lot about how to report and how to do this and how to do that. And all this other stuff. So, excuse me if I'm going to be scrolling down to the other portion which affects Bitcoin. And there may be some other stuff they injected in here to spy on you or give permission to spy on you or eavesdrop. Um, they could just totally amend laws just like that. Agreed. Put into law. I find that overbearing, to be honest with you. Okay, so here's, hold on. That should be really close. Okay, I'm really close. Okay, so here it is. Division 19, Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing. Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering, and Terrorist Financing Act. So in this section, they made some amendments as well. Okay, so let's see if I can remember where the hell they are. Okay, so some of the things here, like for example, this in particular, it says establishing an agency that is responsible for ensuring compliance with Parts 1 and 1.1 for the dealing with reported and other information. So, so they've added that into this Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering and Financing Act. Now, if you read this and read where this replaces it, I mean, they're just trying to amend, really firm up their enforcement or their spying or their snitching. Is more of if you really want to know what they're doing, they're literally spying on you, on what they do, on what you do with your money, and they're reporting your activities. And this just gives them more spying and more reporting enforcement. Again, I'm looking at it from an outside perspective, looking at you guys. From a person who does not understand anything about this. I'm just walking in and I'm seeing this nonsense going on. I'm going, this is utterly stupid. Again, I'm looking at it from the outside, looking in. I guess from a person who doesn't quite understand, the situation or scenario, it's utterly stupid. And I would imagine anybody else who realizes what's going on and is looking at what's happening is literally saying the same thing. This is utterly stupid. So, anyways, let's scroll down to see what other changes they've made. So persons and entities. So any natural person, like a real live physical breathing person, and entity as in legal entities, corporation, company, partnership, whatever, etc., authorized under provincial legislation to engage in the business of dealing in securities or blah blah blah. Oh, this is something else. So they've changed this part to the person who's dealing securities, and this is a little different. This is changed. Pretty much everything's the same from what I read, except this portion under here says, other than the person who act exclusively on behalf of such an authorized person or entity. And in this section, I think they're talking about like someone who handles escrow accounts, right? Other than person who act exclusively on behalf of such an authorized person or entity. So, for example, if I was in Canada, if I opened a gateway into Canada, allowing Canadians to do this. So, here's the thing. I guess they're saying anybody who is acting in fiduciary responsibility on behalf of, exclusively on behalf of an individual or entity, well, they're not really, a money service business, I think is what they're saying. Other than, okay, all right, sure. And that makes sense, okay. And then replaced by the following, it says here, person entities that have a place of business and are engaged in the business of providing one of the things. So I apologize, but this definition was way up there when I first mentioned the money service business, and it gave specific definition of what it was. So actually, let me well, I'm just going to go ahead and read it from here because it's the same thing. So that replacement, that money service business that they replaced and they added virtual dealing in virtual currencies is also in here. So I'm going to go over it specifically in this part of the section. So, so this part talks about the money service business, right? Person and entity that have a place of business in Canada and that are engaged in the business of providing at least one of the following services. Okay, and then again, if you scroll down, you'll see that it's right here. It says dealing in virtual currencies as defined in the regulations, or any service described in the regulation made under paragraphs 73 1A, which probably just goes back to the original, law or whatever. And then it goes down to add another thing here. So, person and entity that do not have a, so this H1 has basically been added as well, because it used to be, well, if you're not in Canada, it doesn't apply to you. The taxing and everything doesn't apply to you really, or some of these things didn't really apply because I'm not in Canada and I'm just, we're just trading. And basically the whole point is they're giving you access to a bank account in Canada, and they're granting access to you as long as you comply with FINTRAC and money laundering laws and terrorist financing laws. Basically, if you join us in monitoring the activities of, well, everybody in Canada, and also snitching on people, I'm just trying to get real, alright? Get real, please. So in people in Canada, person or entity. So that's pretty broad. As a matter of fact, that's so broad. It kind of reminds me in my other episode when the U.S. government was trying to say anybody who deals in cryptocurrency is a money transmitter, until it was clarified that no, not everybody. There are exemptions, like people who actually use money for their own personal account, for their own purpose, are not money transmitters. Well, I can't imagine that in Canada it's any different. That if you're a user for your own personal account, for your own use as an investor, that you would be considered a money service business. Because then, if that's true, then everybody who deals in Canadian dollars, I think they're also called loonies. All right, you kind of make, it's kind of weird. Why would a Canadian dollar be called a loonie? Because it's literally, because you're all loonies. That's, anyways, I think what's going to happen is they're going to regulate the business portion, like the exchanges or anybody who, a business specifically for the purpose of just converting virtual currencies to fiat currencies or stuff like that. Things like that, that they act like a bank, or they transfer their money transfer service business. Any company, like, it has to be a company. It's not for, they're doing it for a third party versus you're doing it for yourself. And I think that's going to be a key into how they regulate things. I believe so, because if they really go hard line on this definition, like literally person, any entity, you're a money business service. You have to report, make reports. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Oh yeah, by the way, they also put an exemption for, like, any company or entity that has assets over $75 million dollars. They're exempt. Oh, the rich are exempt from doing any of these. But everybody else who's not very, very wealthy, well, guess what? You have to comply with all these ridiculous rules with your money. So, anyways, that's up in the upper section where the definition, the new definition of money service businesses. So read it. Take time to read this, Canadian people. This is your stuff. I don't know why I'm reading. Well, I know why I'm reading, because I am going to Canada, and I'm gonna challenge some of these things here, because I believe that this is all written to deceive and to confuse the Canadian people. This is all this is. This whole purpose of any of this, to me, looks like to deceive the people of Canada, to deprive your wealth, the people. I'm not talking about just the rich. I'm talking about everybody who's in Canada. So that's just my opinion. Of course, I'm not a Canadian citizen, so my vote doesn't count there. So as you read on, this is a problem for anybody in Canada. Is if you have a place of business in Canada, of course, if you're going to be dealing if you're going to be trading in bitcoins as an individual, wouldn't you say that is your business? So anybody who deals or uses or trades virtual currencies, you now could fall under this, which is ridiculous, by the way, because not everybody's gonna. I would say it's almost unenforceable, because not everybody's gonna give a damn about this. Not every user is gonna give a damn about this. They're not gonna comply with all these silly rules, because they're just using it to exchange as a means of exchange. But for the companies that are in the business of doing this, like, a company like Western Union, sole purpose of doing it for a third party, just to transmit funds, any virtual currencies that do that and for that particular purpose, I could understand. But they're just putting any person, so they better come up with some better guidelines, Because right now, to be honest with you, there are no guidelines. Because they have not made any regulations with virtual currency, so there are no regulations. So they have to come up with one, and they better come up with one fast, because as far as I know, there is nothing. Okay, so let's take a look further down. And so this part here, this is where it's affecting. I don't know why Canada has to affect the rest of the world based on what a person does in Canada. Why? I have to ask you. I have to ask the lawmakers. What the hell were you thinking? Why should a person in Canada affect how a business operates all over the world? And not only that, but why does a person in Canada, not only that the person has to, okay, not only does the person has to be Canadian, but where the Canadian is at the time also affects how the rest of the world does business. I think this is ridiculous. It really is. And I also think it's not enforceable. I don't think it's enforceable. And how would you ever know? Unless you were spying on every Canadian or everybody in Canada. Okay, so let's go to this section here. It says, now this is the section that affects people outside of Canada. So persons and entities that do not have a place of business in Canada that are engaged in the business of providing at least one of the following services that is described at persons or entities in Canada and that provide those services to their customers in Canada. So the key word is in Canada. So this is where I feel that it's gonna cause damage to Canada, to the Canadian economy. If I'm not mistaken, under the Canadian Constitution, Canadian citizens have a right to move freely within Canada. They have the right, as long as the government allows it. Because remember, the Canadian government can definitely abridge that right. They can just say, well, you know what, we're going to change that. You can't leave your province. If you're registered in that province, you have to stay in that province, and you have to get permission to go into another province. They can change that. You can also, Canadian citizens have the right to leave Canada. So if you ever noticed, most of the Canadian cities are right next to the border of the U.S. So here's the caveat on this thing here is, for someone like me, all I have to do is wait for the Canadian or the person or entity in Canada to come into the United States. And then I will send the Bitcoins to that person, and then my responsibility, I have no obligation to report anything to Canada. None whatsoever. Because it has to be in Canada. So they've changed this wording a little differently from the money business service to the laundering service. So there's a slight change. I'm going to go over that. So if you read here, it says person entities that do not have a place of business in Canada that are engaged in the business of the following, at least one of the following services that is described or directed at persons or entities in Canada, and that provide those services to their customers in Canada. So the key word here is this very important, and. So the condition is basically if this and this has to apply for this to have an effect. on person or entities that do not have place of business in Canada. Um, so basically, the person or entity has to be in Canada for this to take effect under Canadian law. Stupid, right? Really stupid, because all it, Canadians, you have the right to leave Canada. You have a constitutional right to leave Canada. But you can also go back to Canada. And let me just, I'm sorry for the long episode. I mean, this is like, it's affected me because, well, I guess it really doesn't affect me because good luck trying to define dealing in virtual currencies. You'll probably find that encompasses the government itself, because virtual currencies, as far as I know, Canadian dollars are, if you look in your bank account, that's not really, legal tender. That's a virtual Canadian currency. That's a virtual currency. I'm pretty sure that is. How do you think wire frauds are committed? Credit card fraud is committed. Those are all forms of, in my opinion, virtual currencies. Electronic funds transfers are nothing but virtual currencies. So good luck in trying to define virtual currency, because it may not even apply. It may not even apply. They said digital, virtual, dealing in virtual currency. That may not even talk. That may not even mean Bitcoin. Because right now, electronic fund transfers are virtual currencies. They're Canadian dollars, but they're virtual currency, and you can call them virtual currency. You can call them a currency because they're backed by Canada, the Canadian government. So it makes me wonder. Anyway, excuse me. I'm gonna go to Google Maps here real quick. Let's see if it'll come up. So I don't know. I think the lawmakers of Canada are gonna probably do this. I have a feeling that they're probably gonna take the same stance as if you are an individual and you are trading and doing things for your own account, and you're banking with a reporting entity, that there might be exceptions. You might be exempt from it, because think about all the people in Canada who use money, virtual currency, quote unquote, the money in your bank account. So, I mean, it gets kind of weird. That would mean everybody would become a reporting entity, and I would have to report myself that I transferred 10,000 loonies to my other account, and then that other account is also mine, so I would have to report that I also received. So I sent 10,000 loonies. I would have to keep track of it. It's literally ridiculous. It's ridiculous. This is absurd. I've never. What the hell is this? Oh, looks like Google Maps changed a little bit. Sorry, everyone. If I'm taking so long, I didn't know it was going to take this long. Anyways. That's not what I wanted to do. Alright, so I'm just looking at Google Map. I'll put Canada. Okay. Alright, so there's Canada. And, if you look at the cities, Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, guess what? They're right all along the border. They're all along the border. Look at that. It's not going to be hard for a Canadian to go. Matter of fact, I think Canadians cross the border every day to go to work in America and then go back home. What else? There's, Michigan. There's a bridge right here. There's a bridge right here. Where else can they go? Like Winnipeg? Um, not that far, really. Calgary seems to be far, but here, what is British Columbia? Vancouver? See right here to Washington? Just come on over to Washington and go right back over. So, so the question is the question is dealing in virtual currencies as defined in the regulations. So there you go. Now, there may be something about this. I can't find this. I don't know where this is, but as far as I know, there is no regulation on dealing in virtual currencies. And I don't know what their definition of dealing in virtual currencies would mean. But, the fact that they just said virtual currencies, that can mean anything. That can mean, like, virtual currencies that you get in playing games that are only redeemable in those games. Are you going to make a game company report that activity? I buy at retail and sell on market. Am I a dealer? Am I dealing in virtual currencies? I guess you could say yes. But the fact that anybody who ever buys or sells or exchanges for goods or a virtual currency or goods for a virtual currency, do they become a dealer? Are they dealing in virtual currencies? So the law, all this is basically useless right now. So people in Canada, calm down. All right. So sorry for the long episode. I think this is worthy of talking about. So I would say please take the time to read this, understand it. Also take time to actually read the. Let me see. Read the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering, and Terrorist Financing Act. Take time to read that act. And I still don't understand how you want to regulate Bitcoins in a fashion that you regulate money, because if you've been watching my episodes, if anybody's been watching my episodes, I've said many times, and I'll still say many times, Bitcoins don't exist, everyone. What you're buying is nothing, and what you're selling is nothing. It only turns into something because you, the user, the participant, the willing participant, have turned nothing into something. I know it's a strange way to think about it. If you've seen some of my more recent episodes where I talk about virtual reality, opening a gateway into virtual reality, you enter into virtual reality, and then you bring back with you something from virtual reality, which raises the question of, well, what's real? Because if you read that book, Get Real, that I was talking about, and I actually read some of it. I did some research online, and I read portions of it, and the part that I've read, I'm experiencing some of that phenomenon of virtual reality that the author was talking about. But the difference is he's talking about going into virtual reality as a willing participant. I'm talking about not only doing that and doing a whole bunch of other stuff, but also bringing from virtual reality. It's bringing something from virtual reality and bringing it to reality. It sounds kind of weird. And also I would have to wonder, this is my own experience, is money real? Is legal tender real? Or is it an illusion? Because the thing about virtual reality is that, you know, when you immerse yourself in virtual reality, it becomes reality. And you can't distinguish between real and virtual reality. So people get caught up in this illusion of money, and you think you're dealing with Bitcoin. You've immersed yourself in virtual reality, and you go in there and you're doing all sorts of weird stuff with money and Bitcoins and moving things around, doing this, and then you're like, wow, okay, that's cool. That's just all digital. And then you leave virtual reality, and you think you're in reality, but in essence, what you've really done is you've entered into a different reality. All right, and then now, that reality has become real. And then when you come back to your former reality becomes virtual. Your former reality becomes the virtual reality. So this is all interesting. As soon as I get the book and I read it, I'll update everyone on it. But that's the kind of experience that I'm experiencing. I've entered into a virtual reality where Bitcoins are real. Now that reality has become my reality, because I can't tell the difference. I can't tell the difference between legal tender and Bitcoins. I can't. Matter of fact, I can't tell the difference between the things I buy with my Bitcoin and legal tender. I can't. I mean, I still get it. I still get all those things. When I want to go buy groceries, I can use my Bitcoin to buy groceries. I can also use legal tender. So which one is real and which one is illusionary? I don't know. Sorry for the long episode. Anyways, I felt that I should dedicate a lot of time to this because obviously all this stuff was written to confuse the Canadian people and everybody else. As far as I know, there are no regulations regarding dealing in digital currency. So basically they just wrote this just to write it. At some point they do have to define their regulation of dealing in virtual currencies, and I'm going to have to say it's going to be a challenge, because I've mentioned this before when New York had their hearing on digital currencies and how they're going to regulate it. You don't want to make laws that inadvertently affect your other financial instruments. So if it's a real hard line position on who becomes a reporting entity, you would have to define, okay, what's a virtual currency? What is virtual currency? What do you mean by that? And they say, well, any financial instruments that are intangible and you send through electronically. Wow. You know what that would encompass? You know what, you'll be making everybody, except for the very wealthy, of course. Anybody who has net assets over 75 million, well, they're exempt from it. The wealthy are exempt from, laundering money, from, receiving proceeds from crime. Only the very wealthy are exempt from that. Again, I'm looking at it from an outside-in perspective. I'm looking from the outside looking in, and that's what I see. So I'm not a Canadian citizen in any way, but it is what it is. So it doesn't really pertain to me until Canada made it my problem by saying, hey, by the way, anybody who's also not in Canada but sells anything to a Canadian based on where that Canadian is, well, you're going to be caught up in our law. And I'm like, well, ain't that some bullshit? How about this? Well, I'm in Texas, and in Texas, I can do this till the cows come home. Now, I would have to argue you're caught up in my law, in my country, in my state. How about that? I mean, anyways, I'm just trying to make a point. I'm not trying to like um, start a revolution and wage war against Canada or anything. So, um, not yet anyway. Maybe I'll start a virtual war where we'll have people like wear goggles, the Oculus Rift, and go out there and shoot down, uh, you know, the Canadian empires and you know, Canada, the soldiers of Canada, they'll be all geared up and wearing those goggles and running around in place, you know, pretending to shoot at, you know, the Canadian rebels. Really ridiculous, right? Yeah, I agree. It's pretty ridiculous. Anyways, this concludes this episode here. I think this is a very long episode, but I think it's worth my time to inform everyone on what's really going on. Right now, currently, um, there's nothing going on. All right, this rule doesn't even. All this won't be enforced until January 2015. And on top of that, there is no regulation in place for right now with dealing in virtual currency. There is no regulation, there's no definition, there's no guidelines. So basically, there are no regulations right now. So people of Canada, calm down, relax. Anyways, feel free to comment, like, dislike, or even leave a video response. Until next time, stay tuned. Bye.